such an honor and a privilege to be with you tonight. My special congratulations to all of the award recipients, to your friends and families and mentors and teachers. What a great evening for us all, and thank you for allowing me to be part of it with you. So let's, if we can, think back to what the world looked like before the Constitution, because here's my claim. Our world, the modern world, was made in America. It was made in a certain time and place. That year, the Big Bang, so to speak, the year that changed everything in the course of human history, is 1787, the year that this Constitution was put to a vote and enacted by we, the people of the United States. And the world would never be the same after that. There is, in effect, AD and BC, before the Constitution and after the document. It's the hinge of human history this year. It's a certain time and a certain place. It's made in America. That's the claim that I first want to put before you. So let's think back to what the world looked like, because here's our world. Our world is a democratic world, which half the nations of the planet by land mass and population are democratic. America won the last century. I like our odds going forward, but it was not always so, and we cannot take it for granted, and we need to understand how we got here, how that world became a democratic world in which Eastern and Western Europe are democratic, and South Asia is democratic, and democracy has come to Japan and Germany and Ukraine. So here's what I want you to think back. Remember what the world looked like in 1786, the year before the foundation, the Constitution. Democracy exists in the world in 1786, outside of America, basically in Britain and Switzerland, and that's it. And even the British, they have some elections and jury trial, but they have a hereditary House of Lords that no one voted for, and an unelected king that no one voted for, and an established church that's just sort of handed down, and not everyone is a member of that established church, but not bad, Britain. And look at the world in 1785, it's the same. Look at the world in 1685, almost no democracy, and 1585 and 1485 and all the 85s all the way back into recorded history. Democracy exists almost nowhere in the planet, and where it has existed, it's tiny little city-states, Athens, ancient Athens, pre-imperial Rome, Florence, in which people speak the same language. They worship the same god or gods, one climate, one culture, not multiple time zones, and they're not able to make the thing work. Democracy, over long periods of time and space, they blink out. They're not able to deal with internal dissension and repel external attack. So democracy has existed almost nowhere in the planet in recorded history. The history of the world up to 1787 is basically a history of kings, emperors, czars, sultans, Mughal lords, tribal chieftains, thugs, all. And then, in this year, this hinge of human history, the year that changed everything in the world, we, the people of the United States, did, in fact, ordain and establish a constitution. We put the thing to a vote up and down a continent, and the world would never be the same. And even the ancient democracies, they had democratic constitutions, but they did not have fully democratic constitution-making processes. They didn't put the Constitution to a vote in Athens. The British Constitution, so-called, has never been reduced to a text that even Parliament has enacted, much less ordinary folks. Do you know why it's short? So that, not so judges can make stuff up, but so that we, the people, 225 years ago, could read the thing, farmers, and decide whether we were for it or against it. And you can do the same. You can actually read it. It's written in ordinary English. It's not like Magna Carta in Latin. It's an extraordinary democratic achievement. We put the thing to a vote, and the Declaration of Independence hadn't even been put to a vote, and neither had the Articles of Confederation, and none of the state constitutions in 1776, and the world would never be the same, you see. When up and down an entire continent for a whole year, Americans are engaged in a common conversation about how they and their posterity are to be governed. And there actually is freedom of speech. And you can be for the thing, and you can be against it, and you're not voted off the island if you're against it. The Greeks who give us democracy, they also give us the concept of voting people off the island. It's called ostracism. That's where we get the idea. You can look it up. It's voting someone off the Peloponnesus. And we don't do that. You see, people oppose the Constitution. If you oppose the Declaration of Independence in 1776, you're never heard from again. We're at war, and this is not in a philosophy seminar, and you're for us or against us. And if you are opposed to independence, you have two choices. One, leave. Two, shut up. Those are your only real choices. That's 1776. But 1787, this year that changes everything, this hinge of human history, you can be opposed to the Constitution, and you can become, later on, President of the United States, James Monroe, Vice President of the United States, Elbridge Gerry, George Clinton, Justice on the Supreme Court, Samuel Chase. It's stunning what we do. A whole year, no one dies politically in that year. People are for it, people are against it. They actually listen to each other, they argue. They're Americans, so they're fierce and robust and uninhibited and wide open, and it's stunning. And the world will never be the same, you see. And in that process of, and we care about what the world thinks. We cared about it even in 1776. Read the Declaration of Independence. When you're reading the Constitution, why not throw in the Declaration as well? And look at its first paragraph, in which we Americans care about what the world thinks. A decent respect for the opinions of mankind is important to us, and it actually matters whether people of goodwill around the world will help us or not. Because we actually needed their help then, we will need their help now, and we cared about the world, and we give the world, you see. The modern world is created in the image of the American Constitution. It's a democratic world today, and it wasn't in 1787. And the people that helped us do this, they came from all around the world. 7 of the folks at Philadelphia, we didn't just erect a wall. 7 of the 39 signers of the Constitution at Philadelphia were foreign-born. 3 of the first 10 justices on the Supreme Court, 4 of the first 6 secretaries of the Treasury, including Alexander Hamilton. You've heard of Hamilton because of this great play. You've heard of Madison. You've heard of George Washington, of course, and James Madison. Have you heard of James Wilson? Because if you haven't, you should. He's a scholarship kid. He was in the top 1%. He would have won an award like this if they had had it way back when. He's born in Scotland, and he's low-born, but he's a hard-working scholarship kid, and he comes to America, and he's one of 6 people to sign both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and he goes to the Philadelphia Convention, and he's the greatest lawyer in America, and he founds the University of Pennsylvania Law School because he believes, like David Bourne, in public education, and he's one of George Washington's first 5 appointees to the first Supreme Court. And he writes the words, "We the people." He's the guy who actually writes those words. And he's foreign-born, okay? And the Constitution is pretty extraordinary, but it's flawed. And the flaws are immediately apparent. As soon as they move out of Philadelphia and have ordinary people look at the thing, the first thing ordinary farmers say when they read it within the first week is, "Dudes, you forgot the rights." Because there wasn't a Bill of Rights, because smart people, even the really smart people in a room, sometimes don't get it. But ordinary people do, bottom up. The Constitution is crowdsourced, you see. It's like Wikipedia avant la lettre. It's, and version 2.0 is called the Bill of Rights, and it bubbles up, bottom up from the people. And we have so much to be proud of. Even people like me whose forebears weren't here, but we can be part of this project. And we have been from the beginning, folks whose families came from all the rest of the world. Now, it wasn't a perfect project. So I told you, it's a founding. It's a more perfect union. It's more perfect than what happened before. But it was profoundly imperfect, and so I'm going to carry the story forward for just a bit before because I've got the stage, before I step off. So slavery is there, and it's the snake in the garden, and it's not some peripheral thing, it's central. You know why we have an electoral college. You can have a presidential election this year, and you were taught, oh, we have an electoral college because it's a balance between big and small states. Well, not really. Big state guy wins every time. George Washington's from Virginia, that's the biggest state. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, all from Virginia, that's the biggest state. That's 8 of the first 9 elections. The 9th is John Adams from Massachusetts, that's the second biggest state, or third, depending on you count, and then John Quincy. It's not a balance between big and small states. We've only had 3 small state presidents in all of American history: Zachary Taylor, Franklin Pierce, and Bill Clinton. So it's not a balance between big and small states. That's not why you have an electoral college. And you're taught, oh, well, they don't believe in democracy. They believe in republics, and ordinary people aren't to be trusted. No, they put the thing to a vote. They believe in democracy. They gave the world more democracy than ever before by orders of magnitude. That's not why. And the Electoral College from the beginning has never made its own decisions. They've always basically been potted plants, instructed by the citizenry. That's from day one. That's not why you have an Electoral College. Alas, here's the reason why you do, in one word: slavery. Because in a direct election system, the South loses every time because a huge proportion of its population doesn't vote. They're slaves. They can't vote. But with an electoral college, Virginia gets to count its slaves with a discount 3/5. Remember, the number of seats you have in the electoral college is based on the number of seats you have in the House of Representatives, in which you get to count slaves at a discount. So who's the big winner? Virginia. Big state, but a lot of slaves. It has fewer free people than Pennsylvania in 1800, way fewer voters than Pennsylvania in 1800, way more electoral votes than Pennsylvania in 1800 because it's slavery. So, in fact, none of your early presidents are emphatically anti-slavery. They tend to be slave-holding plantation owners or northern men of southern sympathies. So this foundation that the framers built was an uneven foundation. It was a house divided against itself because of slavery, and because of that, the war came. By that I mean the Civil War. And we elected an anti-slavery president, really for the first time, an emphatically anti-slavery president, and we make amends. Every generation has made amends for the system. They've generated a better foundation than they inherited, and they've cared about the world. Lincoln frees the slaves in part because he realizes that if he does that, Britain will support the Union. Because if it's just about, American Union, why should Britain care about that? But if it's a war to end slavery, British public opinion will support Lincoln and will not ally with the Confederacy. Lincoln is appealing to enlightened world opinion. He cares about what the rest of the world thinks of us, just as the founders cared about what the rest of the world thinks about us. And you have to do that today in 2016. It actually matters whether we continue to be a light to the world or not. So that's actually what gives us the Emancipation Proclamation and eventually the victory in the Civil War and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. It's because Lincoln actually cares about enlightened public opinion, and he's not the only one. Let's flash forward, because it's not perfect. It never will be perfect. It's getting less imperfect, but what about, okay, so black men are voting and slavery has been eliminated, but what about women, Professor? Well, flash forward again, and we actually adopt yet another amendment. The amendments make amends for the lapses, and in the 20th century, women's suffrage is added to the Constitution. And once again, it's added in part because we care about the rest of the world. We've been sucked into a war. It's a war to end all wars, World War I, a war to make the world safe for democracy. And we are not going to have moral credibility to lead the world if we don't let our women vote when other nations are beginning to let their women vote. So America's Constitution has always matured in conversation with enlightened world opinion. That was true at the founding, with the likes of James Wilson and the Declaration of Independence. That was true of Lincoln. That's true of Woodrow Wilson and women's suffrage. That's true of Brown versus, flash forward again, of Brown versus Board of Education. Because For all of the promises that are made, we're not fully living up to them. We're not yet with a perfect union. In the middle of the 20th century, we have segregation, de jure segregation, Jim Crow, in places like Oklahoma. I'm here to speak truth to you all, and it's I'm a very proud American, but we have to recognize where we've fallen short. And we get rid of segregation in America, and one of the reasons we do is because we are in a life and death struggle for the fate of the world against the Soviet Union in the middle of the 20th century, the Cold War. And the battleground for that is Africa and Asia, and the Soviet Union is having a rhetorical field day because of American segregation and apartheid and racism. They're basically telling people like my parents' generation in India, oh, those Americans don't really care about brown-skinned people like you, and black-skinned people like you, and yellow-skinned people like you, and red-skinned people like you. And Brown versus Board of Education says, oh, actually we do. We're going to, but it's driven in part by by an attention to what the rest of the world actually thinks of us, and whether it will see us, because we don't have enough guns to kill everyone, and even if we did, it's not a good thing to do. How much better to be the moral leader of the world, whether we talk about the founders, whether we talk about Lincoln, whether we talk about women's suffrage, whether we talk about an end to American apartheid. Let me mention one other thing that happens in the middle of the 20th century, and it's about the rest of the world. We reform our immigration laws to make it possible for people from around the world to come to America. The Immigration Reform Act of 1965. And the people from around the world, black and white, and Christians, and Jews, and Muslims, and Hindus, and Buddhists, and people from Africa, and Asia, and South America, and Europe, North and South, and East and West, they come to America because we are actually now a regime open to the world. And this helps us with the rest of the world, that they are sending their best and brightest. It helps us, but it helps our reputation with the rest of the world. It connects us to the rest of the world. And the people who come as a result of that build your space program. You know, the first word spoken on the lunar surface is Houston. Houston Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed, and this is because American democracy, as it's evolved, has had this profound effect on the rest of the world. The world is becoming American. This is why, actually, it's kind of harder for Americans to compete, because the rest of the world is following our model for success, and this is good. This is good that they're actually adopting religious toleration and free and fair elections and written constitutions and judicial review and democracy and the rule of law. This is what success looks like, that they're actually becoming American in some very deep sense. And if we can't show the rest of the world that people who are Muslims and Christians and Protestants and Catholics and evangelicals and none of the above can actually get along together, if we can't do that, the world will have lost its last best hope. Say one other thing, and then I'll conclude. So, go back to the founders. They are dealing. When you look at Britain, it's a theocracy of sorts. It's got an established church. In America, there's no religious test to be a federal officer. And these aren't just words on paper. I just want you to think about the fact, and I'm mentioning just because we don't obsess about this, and this is great. America was founded largely by white Protestants. There's not a single Protestant on today's Supreme Court, and no one makes a big deal about it. There's not a single mainstream Protestant, of the 4 people who ran for the presidency and vice presidency the last time around, not one was a white Protestant. The only mainstream Protestant of the 4 is named Barack Hussein Obama, because Paul Ryan is Catholic, and Joe Biden is Catholic, and Mitt Romney is a Mormon, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which didn't even exist as a sect at the time of the founding, and people don't make a big deal of it, and this is great. We are a model to the world of how people of many faiths can all get together. You look up there on Mount Rushmore, and Thomas Jefferson was not a conventional churchgoer, and neither was Abe Lincoln. That's who we are at our best. And we are a model for the world, because around the world they don't do it that way. They kill each other over religion and discriminate each other because of religion and race. And we were a light unto the world at the founding, and we still are so. We're at a crossroads in 2016. There are alternatives. It's a constitutional decision that we're going to be making as citizens. And here's basically my special message to the great class of 2016, many of you who are going to be voting for the first time in your lives. So what's basically the take-home lesson of this story I've been telling? So, what's the point? I would say, well, there's a what question and a who question, sort of. Well, what do you do with a foundation? Okay, you have a foundation. Well, what do you do with it? Well, those of us who are homeowners actually know what you're supposed to do with a foundation. You're supposed to maintain it. You're supposed to shore it up if there are problems with it. If you're really expansive, you're supposed to build on it and extend it, to make it a home for you and your loved ones. That's what you're supposed to do with a foundation. You have to understand it first and maintain it and shore it up and build on it and extend it. Who? Okay, that's the what. Now, who? Well, I think the answer is you, we, all of us. But especially the class of 2016, I just want to welcome you aboard the good ship, we the people. The torch, my fellow Americans, is passing into your hands. Your generation, in the end, will be playing an increasing role in deciding whether America will continue to be, as it has always been, at its best, a city on a hill, a light unto the world, the last best hope of earth. Thank you.